I live on a farm in the quiet countryside with my husband and our 2 children. We have a 2-story home and a classic big red barn, the kind you'd expect to see in a painting. Out here, there aren't many people around. It's mostly open fields, flat land, and wide pastures surrounded by forests stretching out as far as the eye can see. The few neighbors we do have are farmers too. This is, after all, a farming community at heart. On our little piece of land, we share our days with 3 dogs, a handful of cows, and several horses. It all started with Lucky, my horse. He fancied himself the stud of the countryside where I lived. Within a 5-mile radius of my home, he had gathered quite the impressive collection of mare girlfriends. But Lucky wasn't just a charmer. He was also a master escape artist. He'd sneak out of his stable just to visit the neighbors' mares, which I found pretty funny, though it usually meant we had to go track him down in the woods that surround our house. I spent a lot of time walking through the woods and fields, looking for my horse Lucky with my 3 big dogs. There was Bear, a Rottweiler, Titan, a pit bull, and Rex, a Doberman. I usually took the dogs for a stroll through the woods, but that day was different. We were on a mission to track down Lucky, who had unsurprisingly managed to escape once again. And we walked for hours, calling his name, weaving through the thick trees. But he was nowhere to be found. I started to worry. He had never been gone this long before. I gave up the search that day. I figured Lucky had probably wandered off into one of the neighbors' pastures, likely chasing after some mare that caught his eye. Some of my neighbors' pastures stretched for hundreds of acres. I mean, I loved the guy, but I wasn't about to play hide and seek across half the county. So I told myself, let the Casanova have his night out. I'll find him tomorrow. Still, it didn't feel right to stop looking. I hated the idea of him out there alone, but with daylight fading, I had no choice. I promised myself I'd be back out first thing in the morning. The next morning, my dogs and I hit the trail again to search for Lucky. Usually, our walks just meant strolling down my ridiculously long driveway that ended at a dirt road. If you turn left on the dirt road and keep going for about 2.5 miles, you'll eventually hit the highway. The dogs and I usually walk that way, and we had done just that the day before, without any luck of finding Lucky. So this time, we decided to switch things up and head the opposite direction down the dirt road. I also knew that down this way, some neighbors kept horses, and Lucky had a habit of dropping by to pay them a visit. So when the dogs and I finally reached their pasture, wouldn't you know it, there he was, right in the middle of their mares like he owned the place. So I climbed over the pasture fence and started walking toward him. That's when Lucky saw me and began making his way over. Lucky knew I loved him. He was like a big baby to me. And yes, I used to spoil him rotten. I noticed that as he walked toward me, his pace was unusually slow. The closer he came, the more obvious it was. He was drenched in sweat and caked in dirt. When a horse has been ridden hard for a long stretch, their entire body becomes soaked. And that's exactly how he looked, only worse, with dust and mud clinging to his coat. I remember staring at him and thinking, what in the world have you been up to? As I got closer, I noticed he was limping on his back left leg, and I thought, oh Lord. For reference, Lucky weighed in at around 750 pounds. He was a big guy, so despite his size, he still loved to lean on me, resting his head on my shoulder while I wrapped my arms around him, embracing him. He was always my big baby. After I finished comforting him, I began circling around to check for injuries, my heart already heavy with worry, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw next. When I reached his backside, I was shocked to see blood everywhere. His rear end, or you could say his hindquarters, was covered in it, a lot of it. Then I saw the marks, claw marks carved into both sides of his rear, like something had tried to drag him down. It looked like a predator had leapt onto his back, trying to topple him the way lions take down their prey. I moved quickly to his left hind leg, the one he was limping on. there was only a small cut, barely more than a scrape. It didn't make sense. That little wound couldn't possibly be causing him this much pain. Piecing everything together, I came to a rough conclusion. Whatever had tried to jump him, Lucky must have fought back. He probably bucked and kicked with everything he had, throwing it off and defending himself the only way he knew how. Maybe that's how he hurt his leg, but I couldn't be sure. Still, I was deeply worried about poor Lucky, so the dogs and I stayed by his side and walked with him all the way home. The journey took us about an hour and a half. It took much longer than usual. We had to stop often so Lucky could rest. His injuries clearly wore him down. At one point, I honestly wasn't sure we'd make it home at all. At the time, my husband was at work and the kids were still at school. It was just little old me, 3 loyal dogs, and Lucky. We took our time, moving slowly, and eventually made it back home. Once there, I led Lucky into his pen and gently bathed him, washing away the blood and sweat, trying to ease his pain and figure out just how bad things really were. The bath was mostly to rinse off the blood so I could get a clearer look at his injuries. As the water ran over him, the full extent of the damage became visible. The scratches across his hindquarters were deep. Just like I'd suspected earlier, it looked as if some kind of predator had leapt onto him and raked its claws down his back, trying to drag him down. I also carefully bandaged the wound on his leg, then called the vet. When the vet arrived, even he couldn't say for sure what had attacked Lucky. All he could tell me was, well, something definitely got to him, but I couldn't tell you what it was.
Well, something definitely got to him, but I couldn't tell you what it was.
I was deeply worried. Lucky was in such rough shape, and a part of me feared the vet might suggest something I wasn't ready to hear, that it was time to put him down. And he did warn me. Putting Lucky down might sadly become necessary, but I told him I wanted to give him a chance first. My husband, my kids, and we all loved him deeply, and I wasn't ready to give up on him. The vet gave him an antibiotic injection and carefully applied a medicated cream to his wounds, doing what he could to help him heal. I was heartbroken and angry over what had happened to Lucky, and I couldn't just let it go. I decided to head back out there, determined to find where the attack had happened. I hoped to spot some blood splatter or signs of a struggle, maybe even tracks that could point to whatever had done this to him. So I headed back out there with my dogs, determined to find some kind of clue. We walked up and down the dirt road, combed through the neighboring pastures, and searched every spot that might hold an answer. After hours of looking, just when I was starting to lose hope, I finally found something. There was a large splatter of blood on the dirt road, definitely the spot where Lucky had been attacked. The spot was not far from the pasture where I had found him earlier, but unfortunately there were no footprints or other clues that could reveal who or what had done this to my horse. Eventually I gave up the search and headed back home to care for Lucky. After some time had passed, I remember on one particular day, I didn't get the chance to walk the dogs in the morning. I'd been tied up with other things. So I took them out for an evening walk instead, something I occasionally had to do when the day got away from me. I remember that night so vividly. It was a warm summer evening and a full moon hung low in the sky, casting a light across the open fields and woods, almost bright enough to pass for daylight. Some folks might be uneasy walking alone in the countryside after dark, but not me. I was raised a tough country girl, and the darkness never really scared me. Besides, I had my 3 big dogs by my side, and I didn't think anything or anyone would dare mess with us. But as I reached the end of my driveway and stepped onto the dirt road, I noticed something strange. Out here in the country, the nights are usually alive with sound. The steady hum of crickets, the croaking of frogs, the rustle of unseen critters in the brush. But that night, there was nothing. Just silence. And as any country girl knows, that kind of silence usually means one thing. A predator is nearby. Still, I wasn't too worried. I had my 3 dogs with me, and I believed they could handle whatever was out there. Looking back now, I realize I was being naive. That's when things took a strange and unsettling turn. My dogs began acting unusually hesitant and uneasy. Normally, they'd lead the way, noses to the ground, eagerly exploring ahead. But that night, they kept stopping, sitting down as if unwilling to move forward. I'd take a few steps ahead, but almost immediately they darted in front of me, blocking my path, as if trying to hold me back from going any further. I remember feeling stubborn and torn. Part of me was uneasy, but the other part brushed it off. I shook my head and called to the dogs, trying to sound firm. Even though a small voice in the back of my mind was starting to wonder if maybe they knew something I didn't, I kept walking, maybe another minute down the dirt road, when Bear, my Rottweiler, suddenly lunged forward and gently clamped her mouth around my hand. She tugged at my hand, trying to spin me around like I was a child, nudging me to turn back home. I stopped, caught off guard. It almost seemed cute, even funny. But that's when I noticed Titan, my pit bull, standing completely still, staring behind me, her body trembling. Her eyes were locked on something over my shoulder, and then she began to pee herself. Sitting next to Titan was our Doberman Rex, and he too was trembling. Then, without a sound or warning, both Rex and Titan bolted, turning tail and sprinting full speed back toward home, as if their lives depended on it. I was alone now, just me and Bear. She still held my hand gently in her mouth, as if pleading with me to turn back. The moment Rex and Titan disappeared into the night, that's when I knew something was behind me. The thought of turning around made my skin crawl. I wasn't sure I could handle what might be standing behind me. At the time, I don't think I could because a paralyzing fear gripped me, and I couldn't move. Something primal in me knew whatever was behind me wasn't meant to be seen. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but I was frozen. Eventually, I slowly turned around, and at that moment, what I saw changed my entire perspective on life. I saw something that isn't supposed to exist. Standing on a small hill ahead of me was a towering figure with glowing yellow eyes, almost golden. Its silhouette was so massive, it blotted out the full moon behind it. It had tall, pointed ears perched high on its head, sharply defined, almost like a Doberman's when the ears are cropped. This thing was standing on 2 legs, not like a man, but like something pretending to be one. I was in shock. We stood locked in a silent standoff. It stared at me, and I stared right back, unable to move. I felt like a deer caught in headlights, frozen in place. I didn't regain control of my body until it growled, a deep guttural sound like a dog's, but far more menacing. It was louder, heavier, like a lion or something more alpha. Its body was lean and unnaturally sculpted. A broad, powerful chest tapered down to a narrow waist, every line of its torso sharply defined, like a six-pack chiseled into stone. As its growl rumbled, I slowly began to turn away, one hand gripping Bear's collar, and started walking back to my driveway. I couldn't bring myself to look back. Deep down, I knew it didn't matter. If it wanted me, it would take me, whether I ran, stood still, or dared to turn around. There was no escaping something like that. And to be honest, if it was going to get me, I didn't want to see it happen. I'd rather it be over before I even knew it. Growing up in the wilderness, I understood how predators think, how hunters behave. If I ran, I'd only become prey, and whatever that thing was, it was definitely a hunter. That's why I kept repeating the same words in my head. Don't run, don't run. But every part of me wanted to. My instincts screamed at me to bolt, but I knew I couldn't. I had to show strength, even if it was a lie. I had to act like I wasn't prey. So I walked. Slowly, deliberately, Bear at my side. I didn't glance back, not once. Bear was trembling, her nerves on edge, but she stayed with me. Step by step, we made it to the end of the dirt road, back to the safety of my driveway. That's when I saw them, Titan and Rex, waiting for us. Their tails wagged wildly as they bounded toward me, jumping and circling, overjoyed that we were okay. And then the sounds returned. The crickets began to chirp again. Frogs croaked from the woods, like the forest itself had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. In that moment, I thought it was over. I felt the weight of survival hit me all at once, and I broke down. I don't usually keep my dogs inside overnight, but that night I did. I needed them close. It was only after I knew we were safe that the sobbing came. I curled up on the floor with the dogs, the adrenaline wearing off, the fear catching up. That's how my husband found me when he got home curled in a heap, tears streaming down my face. He rushed to me, held me tight, and asked what had happened. I told him everything, though deep down, I never expected him to believe me when I said I'd just seen a werewolf.
I looked at her in disbelief. It was the last thing I expected her to say. Something so wild, so unbelievable, so far outside the realm of reason, it didn't even seem possible. But the look in her eyes, the way she was shaking, I could tell she believed it. And that's what unsettled me most.
I said, "Of course I'm serious. I'm telling you the truth. I've never seen anything like it in my life." Bless his heart, my husband's the kind of man who needs to see something to believe it. But even he couldn't deny how shaken I was. The very next day, we called in the electricians and had a full security system installed around the property. Cameras went up, including one aimed directly at the stables where Lucky and the other horses sleep. That one has night vision. Now some nights, I find myself lying awake in bed, staring at the grainy black and white feed from that camera, watching the shadows, waiting, wondering if the Dogman will show up again.